This summer, I took my daughter Eliyah to the Kennedy Center to see the hit Broadway musical Back to the Future. The 1985 Robert Zemeckis film was a childhood favorite of mine. The play was fine, not great, but the nostalgia and the synergy, connecting my own memories with my daughter's special interest of musical theater, that was priceless. 4 years after Marty and George McFly won the hearts of kids across America, Cher released her smash hit, If I Could Turn Back Time. I'm going to sing it for you now. I'm not. But here's a few of the lyrics. If I could turn back time, if I could find a way, I'd take back those words that have hurt you. Now, both of these 1980s offerings were about regret, about what might be possible if we could erase the mistakes of our past or remove the conditions that brought about hurt and suffering. Of course, it doesn't really work that way. This year, more than most, I suspect we're feeling the gravity of this fact, the movement of history in one inexorable direction. Doc Brown, in his time machine DeLorean, might not need roads, but history itself is like a one-way highway. Each of us may be in the driver's seat of our individual lives, but we all must travel in the same direction. Given that we cannot roll back time, we must now exist in the thorny aftermath of this pretty terrible year, a year marked by war and suffering and death of too many innocent people, a year of rising anti-Semitism and failed leadership, and how challenging for this Yom Kippur to sit between or in the liminal space between the Gregorian date, October 7th, whose horrors have been seared into our minds, and the first Jewish yahrzeit, which we'll observe during Shmini Atzeret, Simchat Torah in Israel, less than 2 weeks from today. In any normal year, Yom Kippur is the day on which we most confront our own mortality. But this year we might find ourselves holding our breath between tomorrow's Yizkor and the Yizkor of Shmini Atzeret to come. Here's a poem by Avishai Chori from Beersheva in southern Israel, who lives in Jerusalem. This is one of 10 reflections on October 7th selected by Makom L'Shira for Israel's 76th anniversary. It imagines what it might be like if we could reverse the flow of time, if October 7th had never happened at all. It's called The Proposal. Harachaman, hu yishlach lanu refuah shlema. Merciful One will send us a full recovery. God will put infants back to sleep and turn back time. And we'll stop it at 6:28 a.m., Saturday, October 7th, 2023, the holiday of Simchat Torah. God will keep the party going forever and make the great and white snow fall on the Strip and around it. The Merciful One will rebuild the trust lost in mercy and repair the broken fence and block the arc of missiles in the sky. The Merciful One will let us say words like love again. Harachaman hu yimche et hazichronot, the Merciful One will remove the memories, and children will know all that is precious, dear, starry, their lives, their eyes, their cheeks, their freckles are trembling under a knife. The poem is about yearning for innocence and a desire to overcome fear and hate in favor of love. Harachaman hu yaniach lanu lomar shuv milim kamo ahava. The Merciful One will let us say words like love again. We cannot turn back time. But as we make our way down the road of history, Jewish tradition demands that we check our rearview mirrors. And when we do, we see that we passed another milestone not so long ago on the Jewish calendar. one the rabbis see is essentially tied to these high holy days, and especially to Yom Kippur. Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av. This year, more than most, we carry Tisha B'Av with us. Tisha B'Av, our national Jewish day of mourning, is about the results of hatred directed toward us by others, and hatred directed toward us by one another. In his compellingly titled and artfully written book, This is Real and You Are Completely Unprepared, Rabbi Alan Liu lays out the season beginning not with Rosh Hashanah or even Elul, but with Tisha B'Av, back in the height of summer. The time between Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur, this great 7-week time of turning, is the time between the destruction of Jerusalem, the crumbling of the walls of the great temple, and our own moral and spiritual reconstruction. The year has been building itself up, and now it begins to let go. The natural cycle of the cosmos, the rise and fall, the impermanence, and the continuity all express themselves in this turning. The walls come down, and suddenly we can see. Suddenly we recognize the nature of our estrangement from God, and this recognition is the beginning of reconciliation. What is the effect of carrying Tisha B'Av forward into Yom Kippur? It means an honest engagement with our suffering. By glancing again and again in that rearview mirror, better prepares us for future challenges. And when the year that passed was especially tough, unfathomably hard, gazing at the new year through a Tisha B'Av lens demands that we develop strategies, not just for our survival, but for our future thriving. Rabbi Liu says life bets that we won't be willing to endure the suffering it requires. Life bets that we will try to shut out the suffering, and in doing so, shut out life in the bargain. Tisha B'Av sidles up to us, he writes, whispering conspiratorially with a racing form over its mouth. Tisha B'Av has a hot tip for us. Take the suffering. Take the loss. Turn toward it. Embrace it. Let the walls come down. This past year, we were reminded that suffering is real, that anti-Semitism is a fact we must contend with, that there's no simple cure for hate. But Rabbi Abraham Isaac Kook, the first Ashkenazi chief rabbi of Jewish Palestine, understood that there is a salve for hate, even a preventative treatment for becoming hateful in response. Love. Rav Kook writes, if we were destroyed and the world with us due to sinat Ḥinam, baseless hatred, then we should rebuild ourselves and the world with us with Ahavat Ḥinam, baseless love. Now, some skepticism about such a claim is understandable. Our hostages remain in captivity. Israel is embroiled in a regional conflict with a pernicious enemy who attack us from the very soil of our ancient nemesis, that of Persia and Babylonia. Netanyahu and his cronies are dismantling the very fabric of Israeli and Palestinian society. Some hatred may be deserved, but sinat Ḥinam, causeless hatred about which our sages cautioned us, continues to chip away at Jewish pluralism and solidarity. Love as a solution is not simple, but it is also not trite. Love is so untrite, in fact, it may even be the thing Judaism is most about. That's the claim of Rabbi Shai Held, one that he makes in his new book aptly titled Judaism is About Love. In his 540-page magnum opus, polemicizing Christian assumptions about its parent religion, Held, who was, if you remember, our inaugural scholar-in-residence in this renovated building, insists that pain and loss need not be met only with sadness and grief. Trauma can lead us to retreat into ourselves, he writes, to withdraw from community and companionship, to feel so deflated that we grow incapable of intimacy and connection. Few things can be as isolating as intense loss. Held acknowledges there's room within the tradition for hating sinners, even hating anti-Semites. But this is no excuse, he says, for fatalism or despair. The Jewish tradition is not optimistic about human nature, he admits. But it is stubbornly, insistently possibilistic. Its deeply held conviction is not that we will choose the good, but that we can do so. So what then do we do with Rav Kook's invitation to Ahavat Ḥinam, to boundless love, as the antidote to Sinat Ḥinam? Rabbi Held points out that 6 days after Tisha B'Av, we have another holiday, Tu B'Av, our Valentine's Day. It's the Jewish Day of Love. Held says, let's think about this for a moment. The temple has been destroyed, and we're in mourning. The traditional 7 days of mourning, Shiva, have not even been completed, and suddenly we're thrust into one of the most joyous days of the year. The tradition, he explains, implicitly makes a stunning claim. In the wake of destruction and devastation, we should respond with more love. There is a place for grief as well as protest and lamentation, and often there are concrete tasks that need attending to. Rebuilding in the wake of destruction can consist of endless, seemingly quotidian tasks, but love, he implores, is the only path to true healing. And this might seem exceedingly difficult after a year during which we Jews were subject to so very much hate. But even as we're glancing at all this terror in the rearview mirror, we must keep our eyes on the road ahead. Author and theorist Bell Hook suggests love has unique restorative power. Love heals, she writes. When we're wounded in the place where we would know love, it is difficult to imagine that love really has the power to change everything. No matter what has happened in our past, when we open our hearts to love, we can live as if born again, not forgetting the past, but seeing it in a new way, letting it live inside us in a new way. Mindful remembering lets us put the broken bits and pieces of our hearts together again. This is the way healing begins. Yom Kippur, my friends, is about mindful remembering. We intone the Yizkor prayers because we know our process of atonement is incomplete without memory of that which we have done, but also of our family members, the lives of those that inform our own. This year, in addition to our individual struggles, we no doubt remember collectively all the broken bits, the trauma of mass murder on October 7th, of sexual violence, of displacement and war. Our tradition does not ask us to simply will the pain away. Some of us, frankly, are just not ready. We need to love ourselves and one another through that too. But neither does our tradition ask us to leap from the depths in a single bound, only that we should find a toehold, to insist on the possibility that we can begin to climb out of that hole, to climb out of that tunnel. When the gates close at the end of this solemn day, will we be ready for the possibility of a different 5785? How might we be less fatalistic and more possibilistic? The Ne'ilah service at Yom Kippur's conclusion may offer a clue. It begins with the medieval piyut El Nora Alilah, which asks God to be our protector, to shield us from terror. Bring judgment on all who would oppress or war against us in this closing hour. But then, standing in front of the ark, our strength waning from the fast, we insist on proclaiming no less than 3 times the abundance of God's love. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum v'Chanun, Erech Apayim v'Rav Chesed v'Yemet, Notze Chesed la'alafim, Nosei avon v'fesha, v'chata'a v'nakeh. 13 attributes of divine love. And take note, after the first of these three recitations, after yearning for forgiveness and healing, we quote the book of Numbers, in which Moses pleads for mercy after the sin of the spies. Vayomer Adonai salachti kidvarecha. And God said, I pardon you as you have asked. According to the Mishnah in Masechet Ta'anit, the failure of the spies happened not just on any day, but on a very specific day. Can you guess what it was? Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av. By invoking that first Tisha B'Av catastrophe, by placing it in the liturgy after the 13 attributes during the Eilah, the Machzor reminds us that Tisha B'Av, our Jewish trauma in the rearview mirror, has a powerful counteragent: love. Yom Kippur is, among other things, a day of love. Perhaps this is why Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel teaches there were no more joyous days in Israel than the 15th of Av and the Day of Atonement. In other words, Yom Kippur marks not just a counterpoint to Tisha B'Av, but the fulfillment of Tu B'Av, the 15th of Av, our Valentine's Day. Shai Held says if hatred is what caused the temple to be destroyed, then perhaps love is what will one day enable it to be restored. And he notices that the Mishnah, in the discussion of Tu B'Av, adds a striking detail. When the young women would go dancing in the vineyards, all of them, including the wealthiest among them, would do so while wearing borrowed white garments, so as not to embarrass the one who had none. Precisely in the moment when people are going to couple off to form new, cohesive, and potentially selfish family units, we are reminded to keep the experiences and the needs of others firmly in mind and at heart. In place of baseless hatred, he says, comes Judaism's prescription: compassion for all. The word we most often think of when it comes to Yom Kippur is tshuva, a word we translate as repentance, but it actually means turning. So, Chavra, today is not a day to turn back time. It is rather a day to turn toward one another, toward the better parts of our humanity in love. Held and others make a convincing case that the Jewish God is a God of love, and that Yom Kippur is about love. We, doing the work of Yom Kippur, then must strive to be more loving, even if it's hard, even if we try and fail again. We cannot turn back time. As we check our rearview mirrors, we can't help but see October 7th, Tisha B'Av, and countless other terrible moments in the unfolding of Jewish history. But our people are resilient because these experiences inform but one facet of our identity. We are so much more than our pain. We have faith, we have humor, we have learning, and we have love. Getting over October 7th and 5784 isn't the goal, isn't the point. Ahavat Ḥinam is letting the past live inside us in a new way, so that, as survivors of the Nova Festival taught us and the world, we can dance again. Good Shabbos, good Yantiv.